First of all, I thought Donald Trump would be a failed president if he got elected. He was not. I thought that America's institutions were fundamentally functioning.
What happens when a politician is confronted with their own words? Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. JD Vance recently sat down with Stephen Bartlett on the Diary of a CEO podcast, and the conversation quickly turned to something many people still talk about today: his past criticism of Donald Trump. Instead of avoiding the topic, Bartlett brought up Vance's own comments from years ago and asked the question everyone wanted answered. What changed? How did someone who once criticized Trump become one of his closest political allies? Vance had an answer. Whether you buy it or not is another story. Let's watch.
Where you and Trump first made friends, I should say. Before then, you weren't friends.
No, that's right.
You were quite critical of Donald Trump before then. And you've been probably asked this a million times, but when I actually didn't know this until literally today.
Okay.
I read the piece you'd written in The Atlantic where you criticized him for taking advantage of the struggling working class. What Trump offers, this is your quote, is an easy escape from pain. To every complex problem, he promises a simple solution. He can bring jobs back simply by punishing offshore companies into submission. As he told a New Hampshire crowd, folks are too similar with the opioid Scrooge. He can cure the addiction epidemic by building a Mexican wall and keeping the cartels out. He will spare the United States from humiliation and military defeat with indiscriminate bombing. It doesn't matter that no credible military leader has endorsed his plan. He never offers detail for those plans to work because Trump is cultural heroin. He makes some people feel better, but he cannot fix all that ails them, and one day they'll realize it. Very tough words against Trump.
Long time ago, but
2016 and 10 years ago. What changed?
Well, let me pick up. First of all, I think you always have to be able to acknowledge when you're right and when you're wrong. And there was a lot I was right about in 2016, but just pick up on something. Can you read the line for me again where I talk about no credible military leader has endorsed these plans?
Yeah, it says, it doesn't matter that no credible military leader has endorsed his plan.
Okay. So what I would say is I wrote that. I believed it when I wrote it. And reading it now, I'm almost embarrassed that I wrote it because it was so obviously absurd. In fact, the fact that Donald Trump was misaligned with the military experts and the military leadership of 2016 was a good thing, not a bad thing. Think about those military leaders. I mean, I have a lot of respect for the troops, the people who serve, the people who put on a uniform, but you can make a very credible argument that from the early 90s until, at least 2016, America hadn't won a war in 30 years. Like, there's a reason why Donald Trump mistrusted the military leadership, and he was right. And so much of what I think the president represented at the time was a recognition that American institutions had become sclerotic and broken, and he was a weapon to break down those institutions.
Your assessment of him is similar to the Democratic assessment of him. Your assessment of him back in 2016 is similar to the Democratic assessment of him. There was a private message between you and a roommate where you said he was either a cynical arsehole or America's Hitler. How do you go from that position to vice president of the same person? What is that journey?
A crazy journey, man. But again, I mean, it's you have to ask yourself, first of all, I thought Donald Trump would be a failed president if he got elected. He was not. I thought that America's institutions were fundamentally functioning. They were not. I thought that the military leaders who told us this about a war, or the scientific experts who told us this other thing about a pandemic, were fundamentally, maybe not always right, but fundamentally wise people who were mostly right. I was wrong.
What have you observed behind the scenes that JD didn't see? So in operation, when you see him making decisions?
So, I mean, I want to caveat this with saying that, I didn't know him well by the time, I voted for him in 2020. Obviously, very, very involved in the 2024 campaign well before I was ever his vice presidential nominee. I had that change based purely on what I saw from the outside. It's not like I had insider knowledge about Donald Trump, and that's what caused me to change. Now, what I will say is that having the insider knowledge, one thing that really mistakes or gets wrong, that piece in the Atlantic, that's when that's where that piece was published, is that Donald Trump is much different as a human being than the media makes him out to be. He's very warm. He's a very loving person to his kids, to his grandkids. He's incredibly generous. Like if you see Donald Trump, in the Oval Office, it's like he has to give you a gift. Like he has to, whether it's, a water bottle or a MAGA hat or a coin or a pin. Like he's one of these people who he really likes hospitality. He really likes making other people happy. I had no understanding of that from him from the outside. What I would see is, clips of him arguing with a journalist, and that was it. And that gives you a very, very one-dimensional view of a person. So yeah, I definitely from the inside have seen a much, much more multi-dimensional figure. The thing I say about Donald Trump is I remember this in 2016. And in hindsight, it's just so, so dumb. People would say that he was dumb or that he wasn't very smart. He's super smart. Like he reads a lot. He understands people at an instinctual level better than anybody that I've ever known. But he is a very, very, from a pure IQ perspective, he's a very smart person. And it's interesting that so many people, if you give Donald Trump an IQ test with the other 45, 46 presidents that the United States has had, I guarantee he'd be either near the top or at the top. And the entire American media in 2016 had convinced me, at least, that he was not a smart person.
And with that, I'll leave it there. But after watching this exchange, I think the most interesting part isn't that JD Vance criticized Donald Trump back in 2016. A lot of people did. The real question is why so many of those critics eventually changed their tune. When Vance's old comments were read back to him, it wasn't hard to see that he had serious concerns about Trump at the time. In fact, some of the concerns he raised are remarkably similar to the criticisms many of Trump's opponents still make today. So what changed? According to Vance, he got Trump wrong. He believes Trump proved him wrong through his presidency and through what he saw from the inside. But critics see it differently. They argue that many former Trump critics didn't suddenly change their principles. They changed once they realized how powerful and influential Trump's political movement had become. And whether you agree with that argument or not, it's hard to deny that we've seen this pattern more than once in American politics. What makes this interview so fascinating is that it forces viewers to decide for themselves. Was this a genuine change of heart? Or was it a political calculation that paid off? Because today, JD Vance isn't just another supporter. He's Vice President of the United States and one of the most influential figures in modern Republican politics. As for the argument that seeing Trump behind the scenes changed his perspective, that's something viewers will have to judge on their own. After all, being a good friend, parent, or colleague is different from the questions people ask about leadership, policy, and public office. And that's why this conversation matters. It's not really about what JD Vance said in 2016. It's about whether political leaders should be judged by what they once believed, what they believe now, or the journey that took them from one position to the other. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Did JD Vance genuinely change his mind, or was this simply politics at work? If you enjoyed this breakdown, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more political commentary and analysis. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.